begin? I think the first thing, so this class was billed as rhythmic breathing and natural meditation, and so these two different sort of modalities of meditation is what we're going to be looking at, and I'll be presenting both of them, and then we'll be jumping in to the method of rhythmic breathing, which comes from a particular cycle of yoga in the Tibetan tradition. And then natural meditation is a bit of a cop-out. It's a way that we talk about the teachings that are more profound without assuming that we're actually doing anything profound. So it's more of an invitation to another type of meditation, a style of meditation that is all about openness, relaxing, releasing, and resting in what is natural. In other words, what is ever present, what is the abiding condition. So we'll talk about both of those, and talk about the history of the approaches, and then to contextualize a little bit where we're at with respect to those. How do we enter them? How do we relate to them? So to begin, typically in a traditional teaching, we would begin by directing our mind in a particular way. So setting the stage, particularly with intention, setting our intention and clearing away deviations. So everything that is that would be superfluous. And in that sense, the most important motivation that we can generate is one that is actually in tune with reality, right? So we may come to this program from any different number of places, and generally we sign on to doing something like this because we need help in some way, right? We are stressed out, or we have trouble sleeping, or we need to find a way to regulate ourselves emotionally, neurobiologically, whatever. And so that's a really valid motivation, and it's a true one, and it's something that is real, and that's good, and that's fine, and we can begin there. We can acknowledge that our condition that generally is troubled in some way, right, and we're looking to develop resilience, develop the capacity to be with our situation in a way that's more open-hearted, and more wise, right? So that's a great place to start. But then building on that, especially from the traditional point of view, we need to go deeper, and our motivation should be one that is really intent on uncovering the truth, discovering what reality is and who we truly are. And these two things we'll be looking at in different ways in the practice of meditation as well. Looking inward at the natural state of our mind, and also in the environment. What is it that is truly there, beyond all of our superimpositions, everything we lay on top of it, all of our prejudices, all of the ways in which we form reality to conform to our own ideas about it. So uncovering all of that, and uncovering all of the layers of self-deception to really understand what is there. And so on a deeper level, motivation is about seeing clearly. So seeing the true nature, you might say. And in Tibetan, meditation is called gom, which doesn't mean meditation as we know it. It means familiarization. So it means becoming familiar with, and the idea is it's familiar with something that is already present, right? And in general, you could say yoga as well in the Tibetan tradition. It's called naljor, which means joining with what is natural, or with what the natural state that is ever present. And so yoga, we'll talk about this, we have different ideas about what yoga looks like and it means to achieve and so forth, but in its essence, yoga is really familiarizing ourselves with the natural state, in this approach at least. So as we begin, just try to connect with that in some genuine way. Maybe we can just sit for a moment and I can guide it a little bit. So just begin by coming into your body and really feeling your body resting on the earth and grounding in that way. In essence, what that means is coming out of the thinking mind and into the immediate sensations of the body. And we do this in a very open way, a non-judgmental way, with curiosity, just noticing what we find. Now as you breathe in, try to feel this region around the heart, in the center of the chest, at the level of the heart. Breathing in and just notice what you find there. And as you breathe out, you can just let it be. Just notice it as it is and allow space. We begin just by acknowledging what we find. As we breathe in, we notice and acknowledge. Maybe there's a sharpness, maybe there's a fogginess, a longing, a numbness, a warmth. And so beyond positive or negative, pleasant or unpleasant, and even if it's blank or numb, there is an awareness that is present. There's a spark of wakefulness. Now, in setting our motivation, we start from that place. An acknowledgement of whatever we're feeling and carrying. And first, acknowledging that we want to benefit ourselves. We want to help ourselves. So whatever way you can say mentally, may this practice be of benefit to myself. And feel what it's like to receive that wish from yourself. And now extend that heart wish around you. May this be beneficial to all of those around me. And Notice what that feels like in the body. And then just see how far you can go, extending it further and further. May all beings benefit. And then simply let go of any kind of wishing or contriving in any way, and rest. Okay. So the way we'll be going about the session is alternating like this between brief periods of meditation, sometimes longer, and talking and also question and answer. So we had a taste just now of an overall approach in which on one hand we're doing something, we're investing our intention in a particular way. In this case, an intention to benefit, an altruistic intention. And then we let it go. We just rest. Whatever we've been constructing, we untie it and then rest in the openness and the release of having untied something genuine. And that's an important point. It's not just a random fabrication. We're genuinely applying our intention towards a truth, right? In this case, benefiting ourselves and benefiting others. But there's always a little bit of agency involved in that. There's always someone doing that. And when there is identification and agency in doing something, there's also a hook. And so in releasing the agent and the doing, we may have a shift where we see, oh, there's a deeper release, a deeper opening that can occur. Right? And there's very little difference between those two experiences. The open-heartedness that is opening to all of space and really embracing others altruistically, and then letting that go and simply resting. They're very similar, right? But still, there may be a transition there. And in general, that's the way that I've structured this class. We have two sides, really. One is a technique, rhythmic breathing in general, using the breath as a means of meditation. And the other, natural meditation, which has no method. It's by definition, it has no reference points, starting or end points. There's nothing to do and nothing to be done. And that's inconceivable in some way. But moving between them, we start to see how they can be integrated and how they're really two sides of the same thing. So on one hand, in general, this is reflective of what's called two paths in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. One is called the path of liberation. So many of you are in retreat right now with Mingyur Rinpoche, and some are not here because they're in retreat with him, but he's doing a course on the path of liberation. And that approach is natural meditation, what I'm calling natural meditation. And again, it's beyond any kind of method. It's all about releasing, relaxing, opening, and more about uncovering, releasing everything that is obscuring our mind, relaxing through all of the tensions that are binding our mind, opening all of the limitations that our life and our experience has placed on our mind. So opening, relaxing, releasing. And it's really just about letting be. And that's, even though it's the simplest practice, it's can be the most challenging, because we're always doing, we're always investing in something. We're always bound in some way by time and by the constraints of space. And if we were to be told to do nothing, it doesn't mean just sort of like laying on a couch and watching TV or doing whatever. Doing nothing in the most essential sense is a tremendous achievement, actually, because we have to let go of all agenda and all kind of contrivances. We're always scheming and planning, and we're always looking back towards what happened and what will happen, and there's always this posturing going on, and those reference points allow us to get things done, right? And that's important, but we also need to have profound rest, and that's what happens in deep sleep. It's just a complete release of doing, right? And so the practices of the path of liberation, oftentimes there's a lot of tricks, like to get us to do nothing, pulling the rug out from under our habits of this kind of hamster wheel of activity, right? So that's on one hand, and the other hand is called the path of means, or the path of method. And these are all the things you can do. Tremendous amount of things you can do that are extremely sophisticated. For our purposes, we can just say yoga, the yoga in the way that we normally conceive of it. In this context today, working with body and breath to allow mind to rest. So what we have in the path of means is this idea that mind, body, and breath are a unitive, integrated whole. And we may not experience it that way, but through practice, we integrate them. And yoga also has this connotation of yoke, which means to bring together. In the etymology of it, there's that sense of integration, of bringing together. And what we're bringing together here primarily is our wind, which means our breath, and the way that the breath is in our body in a subtle way. So not just our gross breath, but the way that breath travels throughout the whole body. And that's something we can discover if that's it seems a little bit esoteric. It's something that we'll definitely discover today in different breathing techniques. You'll feel breath in different ways in the body. So the way that is integrated with mind, and in a larger sense, the way that body, breath, and mind can be integrated. And body is just an elaboration of the breath. So when we think of Hatha Yoga, for instance, in the original context, that you do the postures, the asanas, and then on the basis of that, the body becomes more open, basically, which allows the winds to travel with less obstruction. And then you work with pranayamas, so breath work, and the breath work is a preparation for meditation. So all of Hatha Yoga is really actually about meditation, and a lot of that has been forgotten because of various historical reasons. But the true intention of yoga is to prepare the body and the breath for contemplation. So in any case, this integration of body, breath, and mind, and in the Tibetan tradition, it's called lung, sem, yerme. Lung is wind or breath, and sem is mind, and that these are inseparable. And the natural condition is that wherever our mind is going, the breath is flowing. So some of you might have done different kinds of body scans, or where you feel your toes or you feel the tips of your fingers. And when you put your intention there and try to feel the tips of your fingers, there is a tingling, right? And so that's what we're calling wind. And if you put your mind in your toes, Your mind is going there, and the wind is flowing there. And wherever your mind is directed in the body, the wind flows. And in a more subtle sense, it's also true on the exterior of the body. Where we direct our intention, there is a subtle flow, but that's more esoteric. So what happens, though, is that in our experience, wind and mind separate, and we can feel that when, it's kind of like when you wake up in the morning and your mind is maybe like 2 seconds ahead of your body, and you're bumping into things, spilling things, you're thinking about something, and you're not actually where your body is, and there's a separation that occurs. We all know what that's like. Or in general, it's just living in your head, living in mental space, as opposed to living through the body and mental activity occurring in an embodied way. Doesn't mean that we stop thinking or become a vegetable in any way. It just means that the mental aspect of our being and the embodied aspect of our being are in harmony. And yoga, in anyone who's done even just a simple breath work, Tai Chi, yoga, you can see how awareness and breath start to come together. And the way that you move, if you're an artist, wind and mind, whenever you're creating something of beauty, wind and mind are always integrated. There's a fluidity, there's a grace, and there's a presence, a poise, and a precision as well that occurs when wind and mind are integrated. But on a deep level, they're always integrated. We're just not. We're sort of resisting that, and the resistance to that natural integration is what's causing all of the friction. In any case, so the path of means consists of all the ways in which we discover that and develop that, and really it comes down to embodiment. If you were to reduce it to a single word, full embodiment. So there's a metaphor of Tibetan culture is big on horses. So there's the metaphor of the horse and the rider and the path. And so the mind is like the rider, and the horse is like the wind in the body. And the trail or the road that the horse travels are the pathways of the winds in the body. And by training those pathways in a gross way, by stretching and actually, smoothing them out, stretching them out, working them in that way, then the ride is smoother, and so the horse can travel with less obstacle, right? And when the road is smooth and the horse travels in a smooth way, then the rider has a smoother ride, and by extension, the mind is more clear and more full in its experience. And so that's what we're working with in the path of method. And the last point that I'd like to make is that what wind is in the body is thoughts, basically. The more thoughts we have, the more windy we are, in a sense. And conversely, when the mind settles and is relatively free of thought, the winds settle. And that settling can occur on the path of liberation just by stopping and resting. The winds will settle and collect into a pristine experience. Or on the path of means, we can actually manipulate the winds. We can breathe in different ways, and this is what rhythmic breathing is all about. It's learning a pattern of breathing so that we're actually manipulating the winds so that they subside and dissolve. And what dissolution means, the dissolving of the winds, is that all of the proliferation of winds dissolve into what is called the central channel. And we'll work in a minute with, the body is full of these pathways or channels. And today we're going to be working with 3 in particular, the central and the right and the left. And what happens as the winds collect and mind settles is all of the winds of the body collect into the central channel. And the experience of that is one of clarity, bliss, and non-conceptuality. So whenever we have a moment free of concept that is naturally joyful and awake, that's an indication that the winds have dissolved in some small way. Right? And there are also times in our life in which that occurs naturally. So when we fall asleep, the moment of falling asleep, there's a kind of dissolution that occurs, and generally we pass out. Time of death is another one, and periods of meditation are others. And by training in that way to stay with it and not pass out and be in full awareness, we can discover, an entirely different dimension of awareness that's not bound by concepts, that's not bound by subject and object, me and you, this and that, time and space, all of that. This dissolution occurs in such a way that it opens a door, so to speak. So there was a teacher, Chögyal Rinpoche, who had a student who became a famous Western teacher. But this is before this Western teacher. He was in India at the time, and Chögyal Rinpoche asked him. He was young. He's like, "So what is your practice?" And he said, I'm using my breath to meditate, and I'm following my breathing as a way of calming my mind and resting in a deep way. And then Chögyal Rinpoche said, "So what will you practice when you stop breathing? At the time when your body stops breathing for good." And at that moment, his mind sort of stopped, because it's like you start, especially in the beginning, you have a tool. Meditation is a tool, and it becomes a lifeline, in a sense. And whatever method, if it's breath or anything else, you really cling to it because it's kind of a savior. So then, if you're asked that kind of question, suddenly it's all thrown up in the air. Now, what will I do when I can no longer use my body to do yoga, or use my breath to meditate, or whatever it is that we're depending on? So when we talk about path of liberation and path of method, that's the question that has to be at the end of the day, has to be answered. Is what we're doing going to serve us when everything else dissolves, right? And so it's a really important thing, because both of these paths have an answer to that. In terms of the path of liberation, it's just that. It doesn't depend on anything. You're just resting. And whether you're awake or sleepy or totally asleep or dreaming or in deep sleep, any of the modalities of consciousness, you can still meditate. And some of you might have had that experience, waking up in a dream and just noticing mind. Or being in deep sleep, nothing happening whatsoever, but there's still an awareness there. Or in waking life, without needing to breathe in any particular way, visualize, or do anything, simply being present. Right? So the path of liberation is all about that, in a sense. The path of method, you have to do a lot of work, and it's intense investment to get to that level where you're practicing dissolution. You're actually training in dying, in a certain sense. And there's many ways, different yogas and dark retreat, and different ways of doing that. All the ways in which we encourage our reference points to dissolve and stay with it with full awareness. So we probably, I don't think anyone will get into it that far, but what we'll most likely experience now is brief moments of what I mentioned before: clarity, non-conceptuality, and joy, a feeling of bliss, potentially. But in general, you'll notice that your mind becomes more manageable, right? So anyway, so I had to preface all of that, all of what we'll do in that way, because as is happening in many different contexts these days, the traditions are being unbundled. So we have this whole thing of a traditional approach, and there's many different aspects to it. And what teachers are doing these days, for good reason in some cases, and for opportunistic reasons in other cases, they're taking pieces out and then presenting these as kind of standalone things. And so what we're doing here right now is we're unbundling, from the whole tradition of maybe Mahamudra or Dzogchen. These are Tibetan words. We're taking out this thing called natural meditation, which again is kind of a caprice, but it's okay. So we're just doing this thing called natural meditation, whereas traditionally it would be in this whole context of ethical training, of really of working on the emotions and the heart, working on interpersonal relationships and so many different things. And similarly with rhythmic breathing, it's part of a cycle of yoga that is quite extensive, and ideally you would train in all of those, and this would be one piece of that puzzle. But my teacher has indicated that it's okay to take out this aspect of rhythmic breathing because it's beneficial and can be given freely in that way with little risk. But it just should be said that these are parts of a larger whole and shouldn't be considered standalone items. But today, we've contextualized it enough that I feel comfortable doing that. Okay, so before we begin practice, does anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to share? You'll have to unmute yourself. David showed up. Yeah, anyone? You guys? Okay. So let's begin. We'll begin with some gentle movement. And I'm going to be teaching two breathing practices. One is rhythmic breathing, and another is called clearing the stale wind. Well, let's just have a session first. So again, let's just start by settling and coming into the body. And notice what it's like just in that initial moment to come out of the thinking mind and into direct sensing and feeling. Maybe uncomfortable, and if so, just try to stay with it. Now notice the breath in the body. In whatever way you find it. Now we're going to be deliberately expanding our capacity for the breath. We're using our hands to help us. So first, putting your hands on your hips and your fingers around the abdomen, the lower abdomen. And as you breathe, bringing the breath all the way down into the belly. And as you breathe in, the belly expands. And then releases as you breathe out. Try to breathe a little bit more fully than you're used to. And expanding the belly. And you can, on the out breath, pull in a little bit, contracting it. Now bring your hands up to the armpits, with your thumb in your armpit, and the fingers across the pectorals. And we continue to breathe with the belly, as we were doing, breathing in, filling the belly, but then continuing the breath up into the chest. And as we breathe out first with the chest, and then with the belly. And again, really accentuating the breath, both the in-breath and the out-breath. And as we do this, we start to discover breathing like a V. In other words, as we breathe in, it's the tip of the V down below in our belly. And as we breathe in, it expands as it goes up. So the rib cage expands outward as we inhale. And as we exhale, the rib cage contracts and the belly contracts all the way down to the point of that V, which is below the navel. So experiment with that for a few breaths. So belly breathing coupled with thoracic breathing, chest cavity. And now the final stage, we put our thumbs and our clavicles and our fingers behind on our trapezius, with our elbows pointing up on either sides of our head. And again, in the same way, breathing in with the belly, and then the chest, and then feeling the very top of the breath in the upper chest. And breathing out from there, down through the chest, down into the belly. Really filling up beneath in the armpits, the sides of the chest, and the top, clavicles. And you may start to feel areas of sharpness or constriction. You just breathe gently, but still fully. A few more breaths. Now relax the arms. Just rest them on the lap. And now we just breathe with the belly. Maybe very slightly with the chest. Notice sensation throughout the chest, and maybe sensation of wind down through the arms, the legs. Notice any opening. Breathing naturally without any kind of manipulation. without straying into the thinking mind. Just rest at ease in the body, breathing. Okay. So as I said before, we'll be moving again and again between active types of meditation and natural meditation, just resting. So now another way of breathing actively is just bringing our arm up over our head and opening the whole side of the chest. And as we do this, breathing in and noticing sensation in this whole cavity. Really drawing the elbow up. But it's still passive. We're not pushing in any way. Breathing up from the belly into the chest and down again. As we do this, we're still present. Again, not flying away into thought space. Simply present to the sensation of the breath. Sensation in the arm. And the more we can stay with it, the more deeply we're affecting that integration of awareness, breath, and body. Our job is just really to feel. Stay with the feeling. Now bring the arm down and let's do the other arm. And as we move the arm, we're moving with full awareness. Not just moving a stick. The whole arm has our mind within it. Breathing in really fully all the way up into this corner. The upper corner of our chest. A few more breaths. And release and relax. Stay with the breath in the body. And just feel. Notice what has opened. So now we'll be doing a few gentle movements dynamically. And just as I was saying, as we were raising our arm, to feel the whole movement of that of the arm and the mind being fully embodied. As we're now moving with our torso, try to stay with each moment of the movement, integrating the breath and the moving body with awareness. So the first movement will be bringing our left shoulder to our right knee, and if you're sitting in a chair, you can do your best. Don't have to force anything, but the point here is just to breathe and move and be aware all at the same time. So let's take a few full breaths, breathing in the belly, chest. One more full inhalation. Now exhaling, bringing the left shoulder to the right knee, twisting and bending. Breathing in, coming up to center, and coming to the other side. Just at your own pace, 3 times on each side. Breathing and moving. And when you're done, coming back to center. We begin now by feeling what has been activated in the body, noticing how the breath is flowing. Maybe there's some sensation in the heart or the throat, belly. As we breathe out, we just allow that to disperse so that we come into full body awareness. Now for the next movement, hands on the hips. Breathing in and bending laterally. So bending through the side and the neck as you exhale. Reaching the fullness of the exhalation at the end of the movement. Breathing in slowly. And then breathing out to the other side. So just trying to integrate that pace, the fullness of the movement with the fullness of the breath. Not necessarily trying to stretch. When you're done, coming to center, breathing naturally. Again, noticing sensation in the body, allowing it to disperse with the out-breath. And when you feel your body as a whole, more or less, see what it's like to open beyond the skin. Feel behind you. In front, to the sides. And simply open awareness panoramically. Feel what it's like to feel all the way around. Okay, one more movement, hands on the hips, breathing in and breathing out, twisting as you breathe out, exhaling from the belly and chest, breathing in as you come back. Again, 3 times on each side. Following that same sequence, noticing sensation, dispersing with the out breath. And breathing out, releasing and relaxing panoramically. And now not just with the felt sense, but hearing all around. If your eyes are closed, gently opening them. Panoramic vision. Our mind rides the out breath. Awareness riding the out breath and opening all around. We're not focusing on anything in particular. Just resting, suspended in openness. Okay, one last movement, our hands on our hips. And as we breathe in, arching back, and the back, the neck opening, bring the shoulder blades together. Exhaling, In the opposite direction, bringing down the chin, drawing the belly back towards the spine, exhaling completely. At your own pace, breathing in, arching back. Breathing out. Squeezing out all the air. Again, resting. It's like our body-mind is a delicate flower. It only opens slowly, gently. Try to encourage that as you breathe out, releasing and relaxing all around. Through the senses, through the eyes, through the ears. And maybe you have a moment of presence. Simply look at that resting mind. Nothing to do, nothing to be added or taken away. Okay. So we can take a brief break. If anybody needs to, stand up or move around. Especially when we begin the practice of meditation, it's important to have shorter sessions, mini sessions, but shorter, instead of forcing ourselves to sit through, a long stretch. And so that's one thing. And then also, it's helpful to alternate with active types of meditation and natural meditation. And so, if I had asked you to simply sit and watch your mind for the last hour, Travis is good at that because he's trained in the Zen tradition, but, just face a white wall and that's it. It's very difficult, but we can do that if we integrate it with other, setting the intention, moving our body, using our breath, and so forth, but still remaining present the whole time. That's the key, to be able to meditate while you are feeling, thinking, moving, breathing, all of that. And if you can do that, then you can sustain it for much longer with less effort. Right? And conversely, if you were just doing and moving the whole time, you might as well do like a Zumba class or something. You can do that with whatever you're doing, but it's important to pause, and especially in the beginning, because we don't necessarily have the capacity to be fully present while doing all the things we normally do, especially being very active. So this kind of integration is the approach that I generally teach and take. So any questions before we'll start the main methods now for the next hour? These protocols, most of you are familiar. We've been doing this. It's kind of, we do all of what we did in the last hour, sometimes in just 5 minutes, as a way of beginning a session. And anyway, it's a way of beginning by coming into our body, most particularly. Okay, anybody have anything? Okay, so different things you might have noticed, and just the human body in general, there's two sides, and then we're doing a lot of lateral movements here, and twisting to both sides, and this thing, and the human body is structured in that way, and a lot of other things are as well. And the reason, it's kind of chicken and egg situation, but when we look at the way that the winds travel in the body, it's also, we have two sides. And what we'll be doing now is learning a practice called, the long name is the Ninefold Clearing of the Stale winds. And stale winds means the winds in our body, which again, as I said in the beginning, it also means concepts, all of the thoughts that are traveling through our body. They sort of get stuck in different ways, and that's also known as rumination. There's thoughts that are sort of just churning, and they're on autopilot, and they're just spinning in different places, and that's also called stale wind. And so by clearing that out, forcefully and intentionally, we can also clear the mind. And so that's a hypothesis. You have to see how that plays out. But what we'll be doing is a ninefold. So we'll be doing 3 clearings on each side, and then 3 clearings of both nostrils. And the idea here is that the nostrils are where these side channels terminate. So we have one channel, which is, in terms of Hatha Yoga, people might not know this, Hatha, the words Hatha is sun and moon, Ha and Ta, and it refers to these channels of the body, and that when we are integrating the right and the left, the male and the female, the sun and the moon, then there is an integration. We don't necessarily need to code them in that way, but the right side and the left side, we'll be clearing in those ways. And in the tradition is, it's a medieval tradition, so everything does have these male and female names, but we don't necessarily have to subscribe to that. We can just feel into the sun and the moon, and I think that's probably the best way of starting. And the sunny side generally has more to do with aspects of pulling in, of grasping, and of tasting in that sense. And the moon, the lunar side, has more to do with spacious qualities, and also aversion, pushing away. And between these two habits, pushing and pulling, that's pretty much our whole experience. Whatever we're doing moment to moment is either generally pushing or pulling something. Or the third is just stupidity, ignorance, falling asleep. After pulling and pushing all day, we just pass out. So that's kind of the topography of our life, in a sense. Here, what we're trying to discover is what is the pure aspect of that tendency, and the pure aspect of the tendency of pushing away, and what is it to clear out the stupidity of ignorance into wakefulness. And so we'll be experimenting with that a bit. So let's begin just again the same way as always, by coming into our body. And try to feel, on one side, over your shoulder, there's a sun, and on the other there's a moon. Let's try to feel which is where. Okay, so we'll be beginning on the sunny side. So as you breathe in, we're going to be bringing our arm up slowly, breathing and feeling that whole motion as we breathe in, and just as we did before, really filling up this whole area. And at the end of the inhalation, we're going to be pushing our nostrils shut on that side. And then we're going to breathe out through the opposite nostril. And as we breathe out, 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 we're going to end the exhalation where our elbow is just over our shoulder laterally. And then we're going to be empty. No breath at all in the body as we bring our arm down to our knee. And then as we breathe in on the other side, breathing in. And blocking that side nostril. And then breathing out. In that way. And we're going to be doing that alternately on either side. And the way that we breathe out in the beginning, so when we're up top, we breathe out slowly, and as we come down, more forcefully. And then as we get to about here, it tapers off. And so it's said to be like a grain of rice or barley. In the beginning, it's small, and then it increases in velocity, and then tapers off. And then at the end, there's no wind at all. We're just totally empty as we bring it down. So we'll do that on both sides 3 times, alternating. And then the last one, we're going to have our hands on our knees, and we're going to breathe in with both nostrils. And we're going to breathe out just by keeping our back straight as far as we can. Breathing out, down, down, down. And if you can put your head all the way down to the floor, that's fine, but it doesn't really matter. Just go as far as you can go with a straight back. And this we're breathing out with both nostrils. And in doing this, we're clearing out all of the channels. And it's just an open question. See what your awareness is like after we breathe in this way. And I should say also at the end of the central exhalation, you breathe up and you time the breath so that it's full when you come back, just as we were doing with the movements. And you breathe out and you time the breath so that it's empty when you reach the end of the movement. So, just as we were doing before. Okay, any questions before we begin? Yeah, Andrea?
Sorry, I don't know if I missed it. Am I putting my hands on my hips when I lean forward, or am I not cutting that off?
Yeah, I think on the knees. I've actually
on
seen.
The knees.
I've seen it both ways.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
There is a right answer, and I don't know it, but it doesn't really matter. Maybe I'll look it up. But I think I usually do on my hips. Good. Anybody else? Okay. So taking a few full breaths as we did in the beginning. Belly, chest, upper chest. And we're going to maintain that pattern of breathing, bottom up and top down. fully exhale. Now begin breathing in. Breathing out. Holding empty. Breathing in. Other side. And breathing naturally. Following that same sequence, or simply just opening panoramically. Now we'll exhale with ah 3 times. Just exhaling this sigh of release. And as you say ah, feel the resonance in your body, feel the breath, and open all around. Feeling ah all around. Breathing in. At the end of the exhalation, rest, suspended. Again, breathing in. last time, breathing in. This very resting mind, open, without fixation. Clear. But empty like space. Okay. So there's a saying that when we meditate, we relax, and when we take a break, we meditate. In other words, now that we're taking a break, we need to put a little bit more effort into staying present, because it's easier to be distracted and pulled. But then when we are meditating, we really relax. So, something to think about. And in terms of natural meditation, in the tradition that I'm trained in, there's three main hallmarks. The first is non-distraction, which is obvious. You can't be distracted, so coming back again and again when we're distracted. And the second is called non-contrivance, which means we're not trying to manufacture some kind of experience of a peaceful mind or a spacious mind or a blissful mind or anything whatsoever. It's totally uncontrived. There's no agenda. Which means there's no strategy. And that's the third aspect. It's called non-meditation. We're not doing something called meditation. There's no picture that we could subscribe to when we're doing this kind of meditation, non-meditation. There's no object. We're not looking at something, feeling something, focusing on anything. For all purposes, we're not meditating, but this is seen as the ultimate type of meditation. So non-distraction, non-contrivance, and non-meditation. And just like with distraction, we're constantly falling off the wagon, right? We're sitting, and suddenly maybe we can become a little bit self-conscious, and we're like, is this meditation? Am I doing it right? Or we have some sort of focal point. A thought moves through, and if we're not distracted by it, we're seeing it happen, and there's the person seeing the thing, and suddenly there's something called meditation happening. We're mindfully aware of this thought moving through. And that's good because we're not distracted. But in non-meditation, thoughts just move through like a bird in the air. And there's no one there to say, I mindfully saw that bird move through the air. It just happens, right? And so that's that's very subtle. It's not something that we necessarily can just do, but that's the view of the style of meditation, right? Okay. So any questions before we learn rhythmic breathing? Good. Okay. So as I said, rhythmic breathing is part of a cycle of yoga taught by Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, who is one of my teachers, Tibetan Lama. And it comes from India, and it's actually based on a text that is older than any extant text in Hatha Yoga. So from 700, the year 700 or so, but in an oral tradition was likely much older. And it comes from a text called The Union of the Sun and the Moon. And in that cycle of yoga that was brought to Tibet in the 8th century, there's 108 movements, and there's 5 different cycles within it, and each of those 5 has a breath practice associated with it. And rhythmic breathing is one of those 5 pranayamas associated with the overall cycle. And it's designed as a method to increase one's capacity for holding the vase breath. And we won't get into the vase breath, but it's a technique of holding the breath, basically, and then mixing your mind with the breath that is held. And because you're holding the breaths aren't circulating, and as it's held and mind is mixing, there's a deeper and deeper integration that if you get good at it, it can go on for a really long time, and then dissolution occurs. What I was talking about before, in its full dimension. It's a practice that prepares you for death and pretty much anything, because you learn how the winds dissolve, and you learn how to rest without any reference point whatsoever. So that's the full thing. But anything along the way from where we are now to there is beneficial. So in rhythmic breathing, much of the benefit is simply that we're going to be stabilizing the breathing pattern. And first of all, we need to learn how to breathe correctly, which is a lot of what we've been doing already. And then we can recognize how we've learned to breathe in a maladaptive way. And so just with what we started with, breathing with the belly, we have a habit of moving our breath up into the chest. The more stressed we are, the more we're actually breathing up here. And it's not doing a good thing for our heart in general, or it's kind of a cycle. Our heart is tense, and then the breath goes up here, and it just makes things more and more tense, and then we get more tense up here, and the whole thing just goes from that first mistake. So bringing it down into the belly is the first thing to learn, breathing with the belly. And then breathing with the full dimensions of the breath. Typically our breath becomes very shallow, or when we get very agitated, it's very rapid. But most of the time we're using a very small percentage of our capacity for breathing, and it's just generally chest and shallow. So learning to breathe with full capacity, not that we need to breathe that way always, but just that we know that it's there and we can feel that. And if we know that it's there, we're going to be less likely to breathe in a shallow way. And when we're breathing fully, it's going to be more embodied, and then there's going to be less sort of grounding in conceptual activity. It's going to be more of an organic kind of breath and experience. So, we've been learning that, and with this, learning to open dimensions of breath, and there's a lot of work that we can do with that. And then we trained in the Ninefold clearing, so starting to learn about the different capacities of breath in terms of breathing in, breathing out, right? We know that. But there's also breathing in and holding, and there's also breathing out and holding. So there's the in-breath and the top of the in-breath, and then there's the out-breath and the bottom of the out-breath. And so there's breathing in and out and holding in and holding out. And then in the larger cycle of yoga, there's there's breathing in quickly, breathing out quickly, pulling up, and there's many different other practices for becoming acquainted with the proper way of breathing. And by doing those, then again, it highlights how we've habitually learned to breathe with our bad habits, right? So with this practice of rhythmic breathing, we're only focusing on the most simple four: breathing in and out, holding in and holding out. And we actually begin the practice without the holding out. We're just breathing in and out and holding. That's the first cycle. And we're going to be doing that to a count, a rhythm. And the pace of that rhythm should be roughly that of a heartbeat. We may do it a little bit more quickly so that it's easier. But if you're doing this on your own, the pace is just 60 beats per minute. A normal healthy heartbeat. I shouldn't say anybody's heartbeat. So it's just this sort of rhythmic 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. And there's also a motion associated with it. The idea with having motion is that if we're doing a mental count, then there's a mental thing going on. If it's our body doing it, in the beginning it's really awkward because we have to do this thing with our arm and we're not used to it. But the more used to it we become, the body just doesn't need to think about what it's doing after a while. Its virtue is naturally wisdom. It doesn't have to have these concepts. So it actually just disappears after a while. Take my word for it. In the beginning, it's the most contrived thing you can do, right? But anyway, so there's a movement and a count, and there's just one variation on the count. Almost everything is divisible by 4. So for instance, we're going to be breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, and we snap, and we hold 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the most simple form. And we may do 8, and there's a table I'll share with you that allows you to gradually build the count in a comfortable way. But then we increase by a count of 2 every time. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6, then it'll be 8, which is divisible by 4. But then it'll be 10, which is 2 4s equals 8 plus 2 equals 10. So if there's an extra 2 in there, we're going to do 6. So we'll start with 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You just go back to the heart. 5, 6. And that's it. That's the whole method, basically. So we'll start just by learning the motions. And then there's a lot of subtlety that happens when the count increases. And I'll teach you how to breathe in a way so that you can, if you're counting to 20, breathing in to 20, you have to breathe in very slowly, right? Or if you're breathing out, 15, you're breathing, 16, you're breathing out. You have to control that breath. And a lot of the benefits of the practice come from learning how to regulate the breath in a very fine way. And then the benefits also come from the holding. So say we breathe in for 8 and we're holding for 8. Holding in the beginning is just gentle. We're not forcing anything anywhere. It's called an open hold. It's in the belly, in the chest too, and we're just relaxed and open. See what that's like. Just breathe in right now and hold your breath. Notice if you're trying to force anything anywhere, or pull or push in any way. Just hold. Okay, so an open hold. And then when we get into the higher counts, I'll teach you the empty hold, which is just, breathe out right now. Totally breathe out and hold your breath. And breathe in. So again, notice any tendency to try to manipulate that hold and let go of that. If we have time today, we can get into actually actively holding, but that's more advanced. Okay, so any questions before we start? Pat?
So we breathe in and we open hold. We breathe out and we close hold, or we don't close hold.
In the beginning, so with counts that are 4, when we start, it's just 4, and when we're exhaling for 4, it's too short. But when we say if it's 8, it's long enough that we can hold out. And so on an 8 count, what we're going to do is exhale for 4, and then we're going to be empty for 4. So we're going to divide it. It's complicated now. I'm going to guide the whole thing. You'll get it. You just have to listen.
Thank you.
But if you use words, it's just like, oh my God. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have something.
Christina, yeah?
The way we're breathing, okay, it's like the earth breathes like that. 1 year is one of our breaths.
Mm-hmm.
Year. And I think spring is when it exhales.
Right. Yeah. And winter is when we're empty.
And in the fall, it inhales.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And winter and summer are when we're holding.
Yep, exactly. That's true.
I relate that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we take a big breath in in springtime. And in fall, we're heading into dissolution. And winter is coming. Okay, so let's start. So can you see me? Yeah, you can. Looks like the camera's good. So actually, you're going to be touching your knees. So you're going to start at 1. You're going to touch your right knee with your right arm. And 2, you're going to just gently touch your left knee. 3, you're going to touch your heart. 4, you're going to snap. And so let's just do that a few times. Okay, breathing in. 1, 3, hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. In. Hold. Exhale. In. Hold. Out. In. Hold. Out. Now we're going to go in for 4. Hold for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out. In. Hold. 5, 6. Out. In. Hold. Out. In. Hold. 6, out. In. Now hold for 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Out. 2, 3, 4. In. Hold for 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. Out. In. 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. In. 7, 8. Out. Hold. Okay, exhale. And that's one set, so breathe in and breathe out, bend forward. A little bit more quickly, 3 times. Now rest. So this transition should be familiar to you now, just resting, first in the body, opening the felt sense all around, opening the senses panoramically. Just notice that first moment, the tendency to start doing again. The mind revving up conceptuality. Just be gentle and allow that to release. And again, now let's start the next set. And so this time the count will begin with 4, 8, and 8. And so now the difference here, like what Pat mentioned, is we'll breathe in for 4, and then we'll hold for 8, which we've already done, and we'll exhale for 8. But the whole exhalation is going to happen in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, we're totally empty. Then the remaining 4, we have no breath in the body. It's like we're underwater. And then we breathe in for 4. Hold for 8. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, totally empty. And then hold empty. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So again, I'll guide it and you'll be able to follow. Let's take a few breaths. Okay, again, let's begin. 4, 8, 8. Begin. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Empty. 1, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. 4. Hold. 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Empty. 5, 6, 7. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Hold empty. 8. Breathe in. Hold. 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. 3, 4. Empty. 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Empty. In. Hold. 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. Empty. Breathe in. Hold for 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Exhale. 8. Empty. 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. Hold for 10. 8, 9, 10. Exhale. Empty. 8. Breathe in. Hold. 10. 8, 9, 10. Exhale. Breathe in. Hold for 12. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Exhale. 8. Empty. In. Hold. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Exhale. 4. Empty. In. Hold for 14. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Out. Empty. In. Hold. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Out. In. Hold. Nine, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Out. In. Hold for 16. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Out. Empty. In. Hold 16. 13, 14, 15, 16. Out. Empty. In. Hold. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Out. Empty. And breathe naturally. 3 inhalations, exhalations. Full exhalation. Clearing out. Now once again, rest. Notice any residual wind in the body. And as you breathe out, relaxing, opening. And if you're able to rest freely and without fixation, see what it's like to look directly at that resting mind. Or alternatively, see what it's like to release and open without reserve. So awareness knows itself. Okay. So this isn't, we don't have time to go into insight meditation, but those final instructions, when the mind is able to rest in its own place with stability, we can just rest, and we're okay with that, without thoughts and emotions pulling us around, or our mind going out to different objects of the senses, our body. Maybe it's in pain, but we're able to be with it fully. When mind rests in its own place, then we can use that very mind to look at itself. And that's a whole body of instruction that's very profound, but the essence is that we're able to relax so fully that the grasping tendency that creates subject and object, creates distraction, the grasping relaxes, and mind shows up fully. It dawns, it's the grasping tendency is what constricts and limits awareness. And when the grasping releases, awareness simply shows up and knows itself fully. And there's no one there that necessarily is the knower, and there's no object that is known necessarily, but yet it is indisputable. So that's a whole nother chapter, right? But anyway, so any questions on that? I'll show you anything that we did. Here's just briefly. I'm going to send you this document, but here's a table of the progression of the counts, and we just did this. We did the first one and the third one to give you a sense. And this whole table goes up to what is called the minor vase breath, and then there's another one that's intermediate, and then there's another that's the full. And this is my friend Alicia. She'll show you how to do it. Anyway, so yeah. Any questions? How did that go, or anything anyone wants to share? Yeah, Andrea? And Tracy? Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted a little bit, I just noticed that it said a little bit about the hold in the writing, but I noticed that if I was really concentrating on the hold, it kind of felt like a little bit contracted, but I think that it was just to make sure that I was focusing on not going in or out, like sneaking a little bit of air or exhaling a little bit, and so I wonder if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, and you're going to end up there. So two things. One is that it's good to train in being able to hold without over-holding, right? That you don't need to overcompensate in that way. But it's really hard because we don't know how to hold without holding, right? And so the breath, if the mind is stable, the breath, you might have noticed this, in meditation in general, that when you're totally settled, the breath just stops, sometimes for a long time. And you don't need to hold, it's just happening, right? and that's kind of effortless holding. So that's good. But then on the other hand, eventually you're going to be, especially in this method, deliberately holding, and so it's fine. And you would apply, the points of posture for the vase breath, which involve drawing up the perineal floor and then bringing down from above and then holding in that way. And so that's fine too. So just experiment with both. Tracy?
I noticed that I wanted to move a lot, side to side with the movements, and we're very upright, and I'm wondering if it's important to maintain the uprightness and the cross
I don't
sections.
know. Yeah, you don't ever want to rein in the dakini, but maybe start by just being straight. Pat, yeah?
Why don't we hold on the closed for longer than 4?
Well, that's actually the main thing that's going to increase as we go on. So I'll show you. So it's this open hold is what is the main thing that we're developing. Here in this case it goes all the way up into 24, and the reason is that that's when we can really affect this integration of wind and mind, because it's just staying there, and it's like a reservoir that allows us to sink into it in a sense. And so the longer we're holding, the more stable the mind is becoming, basically. But it's hard to hold, and so we have to gradually increase that, and without it being stressful. Because as soon as we're trying to hold, and we're holding on to the breath, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose. It has to be a very gentle hold, so that the breath is entering into the central channel without effort. Yeah.
I do find the closed hold much easier than the open hold.
Yeah, so we didn't get into the difference between closed and open hold, but that's what Andrea was talking about. Closed hold means you're actively engaging, and open hold means you're relaxing, but both are holding. Yeah. And then and that's open hold and empty hold. So that's open hold has air, empty hold has no air. Open hold versus closed hold, both have air. Open hold, holding without effort. Closed hold, holding air with effort. So there's 3 different things there.
Word then. I meant hold with no air.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that it's easier to hold with no air than it is to with air. Yeah, maybe. They both have different qualities, and you can discover that as you go.
Are there any significant hand gestures, or is that just to keep us?
Say that again, Greg. The hand gesture is what?
Is there any symbolism or significance to where the hands are going, or is that?
Yeah, well, I don't know the significance. I just know it's the knees, the heart, and then out. I haven't heard anything more than that. It's probably just convenient.
Yeah.
It's like everything else in Vajrayana. What else do you want to do? It's like, can you think of a better way of counting to 4? And maybe. Anyway. Yeah, Nick.
Are the breaths and the inhale and exhalation, is it still like that rice and barley shape?
Yeah, right. So that's one of the more subtle points as you get into these larger counts. Say you're doing 8, 10, and 10. You're going to need to, in Hatha Yoga it's called Ujjayi breath. In the Tibetan system it's called Drakchen, which means breath with sound. And what that means is that you're closing the glottis. So it's like that kind of thing. You might have encountered that before. And so what that means is that you're attenuating the breath. by closing the aperture basically, and that actually generates more energy because it's kind of hitting the back of your brain in a certain way, but it's also allowing you to control the flow. And so with the higher counts, you're going to, on the in-breath, you're going to start just open, and then you're going to apply it. And at the top of the breath, you're going to release it. And then on the out-breath, you're going to breathe in, out, and then apply it. And at the end, release it. So it flows. It's almost the inverse of that barley, in a sense. But that's a really subtle thing, and, it'll happen naturally if you're counting high numbers. But for now, I would really just recommend sticking, because there's tremendous benefit in just doing what we did, in a low count, holding for 8 or maybe up to 16, breathing in that way, and then just using that as a method to rein the mind in, basically, and facilitate settling. And you can do that at any point in your meditation practice when you just don't want to deal with it anymore, basically. You don't want to wrestle with your mind anymore by just letting it be. And so there's the risk that you can become very instrumental in your practice, which is a fault. But there's also the risk that you just are spinning your wheels. And so you have to find the middle way there. Instrumental in your practice means you're always fiddling. You're like, oh, I feel this way, so I'm going to do this weird thing, and then you come down and then you can rest or whatever. So you don't want to get into that too much, but you also want to have a toolbox of methods available that you can apply according to circumstance, right? Yeah, Pete, Sid?
Yeah, I have this thing when I do the in breaths, and it happens too when I do my daily ones where you arch your back, and you breathe really deep and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Where when I'm breathing up into this upper part, I always want to cough, like it tickles right in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I find myself sort of stopping right before I get there, or once I get a full breath, just letting just a little out.
Mm-hmm.
So I can then rest in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I should do anything different.
Yeah, it's just got to get cleared out, basically. Lots of you just do. The Tibetan answer is always do more of it. But if you feel like it's a problem, then just be gentle. But it's probably just we joked about it before, but it's probably just something that's caught in the flow of the breath, and so it's a subtle breath, and so you just keep doing it. Andrea, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you again about the holds. When it feels, I'm just wondering if I'm doing it, if I'm maybe concentrating too hard or holding too hard in the closed hold, because it can feel like my vision is kind of narrowing, and I'm not sure if that's trying too hard or if I should back off there.
Yeah, that'll happen. I tend to have my eyes kind of half open when I'm doing it. And so there's more of an internal focus, but you don't want to be, totally eyes closed, and then have to open your eyes when you're done and have that sort of abrupt transition. So as much as you can, allowing a relaxed gaze, but it's okay it's not so much narrow, just soften. Try to soften the gaze a little bit, and maybe have your eyes a little bit less open. But that narrowing may be because you're trying too hard, and so give yourself a little bit of space by just closing your eyes more. See if that helps.
When you hold the vase breath and close, how tightly are you holding the muscles?
It depends how macho you want to be. And there's different lineages that do it differently, right? And so, the way that we were trained, it's totally gonzo, and you're holding it until your like skull pops off, kind of thing. And it's not so. I think it's counterproductive generally, if you're not built like a Tibetan who grew up wrestling yaks on the roof of the world. So I think a gentler approach is better. And if you find, it's like what I was saying before, if you find that you're kind of shaking or holding, it's probably counterproductive. So you just really, what this method will do is allow you to gradually increase the duration without increasing the effort. And so it's more about finding, your growing edge with the holding, and then just staying with that, and then gently increasing it as you progress. And I found that in this system, it's just way more. You can just hold your breath way longer as a result of not like trying to force it as much in the end, right? So yeah, it's really helpful, I think, for people that were trained like you and I were. So, but anyway, yeah, good. So let's close with a dedication. I'm kind of circling back to where we started. Just feeling into and thinking that whatever benefit there's been in practicing together today, whatever goodness, whatever peace, whatever understanding, may that be a cause for us to reach our full potential, to be completely free, and so that we can help all others reach their full potential, full freedom. Just feel what that's like, and allow that to radiate out from you. And just let it go. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So I'll send you that document and the recording. I'll just post it to YouTube, and then you can get the link there. I'm happy to hang out, but I'm gonna stop recording it.
Will you do any more teachings like this?
Do you want me to?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's always based on requests, right? But yeah, I mean, we see what we want to do, and we can go deeper into the method itself without as much preamble and all that. And different people have different capacities too, so it's awkward when you get into the higher counts with rhythmic breathing, because you don't want to be doing a long count, and then some people are not wanting to do that, and so it becomes more of an individual thing. But yeah, we can do more. Cool. I should have told you guys to wear long pants.
It's okay.
There's lots of gnats here. If you cover yourself, you're fine.
Not too bad.
You say hi.
Is there a part 2 to this, or is it just one package?
I think that's what David was asking. Well, the thing is, it's part of Yantra Yoga, and so Yantra Yoga is extensive and wonderful. And we invited some teachers here last year, and they taught some of it. Takes about 2 weeks to get through everything, but yeah.